car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Appreciate you spending your Sunday evening with us. We have a panel of experts to answer your questions. Get the questions to us. All you have to do is call, text, and email. You'll find that information at the bottom of the screen, as you see there, all throughout the program. So take advantage of this opportunity. Another reminder, anything that is offered by the firm of Hollis Wright, an attorney standing by live to take your call right now and answer your question. So the opportunity to get some good, free legal advice right now, I would urge you to take advantage of that. Leading our conversation, as he often does, from the firm of Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Josh, good to see you, sir.
You too. Hope you had another great week.
I did.
Things well?
Everything's good. You?
Good, great. The Wright family's doing fabulous this week. Everything's good. All right, so we're going to be doing a show tonight on what we call SSDI and SSI, Social Security Disability Income and Supplemental Security Income, and kind of the role that those play in people's lives, David. We're very lucky tonight to have Stuart McAtee on, who is going to talk about this topic. He's an expert in this area, somebody that we've had on the show before to do a show a little different than this, but kind of the same concept. Works with Alexander Shunnarah's firm and just does a great job. So first of all, thank you for being on to be able to talk about the topic.
Thank you for asking me.
Let's kind of have a jumping off point here. Tell us in general terms kind of how this topic, kind of its involvement in society and kind of how it works in general.
Well, sure. You have basically two groups of people that if they're unable to work, that they may qualify for disability under the guidelines. And one may be a person who is a stay-at-home mom or hasn't been able to quite work out in the workforce, who might be disabled for some reason. You might have another person who statistically it shows that 30, 40 million people are disabled in the workforce. So if they work over a period of time and they simply cannot do not just that job but any job, they may qualify for disability.
How is the program itself generally funded? Is it through tax revenue?
Generally, yes. It's tax revenue for SSI or Supplemental Security Income. That's for people who haven't actually paid into it by paying taxes. But as you work, you pay your taxes and you generally start to pay for your own disability insurance.
How did you get involved in this area of the law? Have you done it since you started your practice, or is this just something you got into over the last decade or so?
Over the last decade, I've been practicing about 20 years, but what I saw in doing personal injury and doing various aspects, I kind of did a garden variety of insurance law and different types of people that were injured. I saw a need for people who could not go back to work after they were injured or had some sort of an illness. So I decided to help them and see what it was, and it is complicated, so it was kind of a niche to learn it, but once you learn it, you can help people.
Let's kind of dissect it a little bit. Explain the difference, if you can, between SSI and SSDI, because that's a question we get quite a bit for people that are involved in suits maybe that we represent at our firm that have the need to apply for disability. Those two topics, those two issues are something we're often dealing with.
Great question. I usually tell clients this. Think of it as car insurance. If you have a car and you buy insurance on your car, you can prepay that insurance over, say, a 6-month period. Drive your car for 6 months and you're insured. Now, at some point, if you don't continue to pay on your insurance runs out and then you don't have any insurance. Same concept, really. As you work, you pay your taxes, and they call them qualifying credits. So you get these qualifying credits which extend your insurability under SSDI out for a period of time. And then when it stops, that's called your date last insured, or your DLI. And if you don't continue to work, then it stops, and then you're no longer eligible for that program. Then it turns over to SSI, which is Supplemental Security Income.
This is different than the Social Security Administration's amount that somebody receives at a certain age. This is disability based versus when you pay in through taxes and you're entitled to receive a portion at this stage, at least in our society, a portion of your Social Security amount. Totally different concept.
Absolutely, and that is very confusing for a lot of people. This has nothing to do with the Social Security Trust Fund, which is your retirement. This is disability, okay? Another thing that people have a lot of difficult times with is understanding what short-term disability is and long-term disability under a private insurance company. So a lot of times if a person works for a job, they may have long-term disability or benefits, which is a private insurance, has nothing to do with Social Security.
This seems to be a subject matter where there's a great deal of, I don't know if you call it urban legend, but kind of confusion in terms of do I qualify? What do I qualify? How do I qualify? All of those. There seems a lot of people have opinions on that. I'm not sure how informed those folks are. So, from your standpoint and your experience, what are the most common misconceptions and misunderstandings about what's available, and also what it takes to qualify for such?
You're right. There probably. All of us probably have a family member or a friend who knows someone or is on disability and had to go through this process. And one of the difficulties we have is people coming in the door, and number one, they think it's going to happen fairly quickly, and a lot of times it doesn't.
Right.
And what happens is a person thinks they cannot work, or a doctor tells them they cannot work, and they decide to apply for disability. So if about 60 to 70% of all people who apply at the initial application level lose. So at the second point, now in Alabama, there is no reconsideration stage. It's just you go straight to the administrative law judge. You go straight to them, that sounds easier than it is. It usually takes 12 to 18 months.
Because of a backlog, or?
Think of it this way, thousands and thousands of people apply for disability. They only have so many judges that can hear them. So every judge, every day, hears these cases, and so if you get in line, I think of it like at a department store, if you're getting a package or something like that, you just have to get in line.
Right.
On occasion, you have what we call a dire need. And this may be a terminal illness, it may be somebody who absolutely can't make it that long.
Right.
Now, everybody thinks that they have a dire need, because they do, really. They don't have any money, they're hurting, they don't have any medical insurance, and they want to get their cases heard, and it's frustrating. And I think if I had any advice to anybody who's watching is don't give up.
Right.
Just keep going. Statistically, people who apply for disability who have attorneys are far more successful than people who apply who don't.
Okay.
So it's also, what a lot of people don't understand too, is the attorney fees are limited by statute, so they can only charge a certain amount, and it's a percentage of the back pay, and I can explain that in a few minutes when Josh and I are talking about it.
Yeah, is there a certain age requirement that you have to have or meet in order to apply for SSDI or SSI?
Well, if you're under 65, okay, and that can be frustrating for a lot of people too, because you might be 62 and just starting to take your retirement, and you want to file for both. On occasion that happens, but if you're under 18, you're not going to get SSDI unless your parents made a certain amount of money, but that's normally provided by SSI if you're a child. So what happens a lot of times too is you may have a child who's on disability on SSI, and then when they turn 18, what Social Security do is basically almost cut them off and make them reprove their case. And that happens on occasion too.
I know we're going to commercial break. You can tell why we bring Stuart on. I mean, he understands this stuff, is great, has a good bedside manner just to be able to explain this stuff too. When we come back, I want to talk about what qualifies as a disability, because a lot of times that's the confusing component for people that are wondering whether or not they should apply. What is a disability? Do I qualify? So let's talk about that when we come back.
We'll do that. We'll step aside our first break of the evening. Opportunity to remind you how you can get in touch with us. You can call, text, email, all that information there on your screen. We'd love to have your questions and pass those along to our panel of experts. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis Wright. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never need legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of this show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to this show or related to other specific legal matters, call, email, or text us to talk with one of our lawyers. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to learn about important legal news that could affect you or your family member. Or simply contact us by going to WVTM13.com and click on the attorneys link. Now, we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and for watching The Attorneys right here on WVTM 13.
Disability and Social Security claims, a topic tonight. A lot of confusion about this and a lot of questions, so the opportunity tonight to get those questions answered. Take advantage of the opportunity there. Call, text, email that information at the bottom of the screen all throughout the show tonight. Josh?
So, Stuart, an issue that often comes up where there is some confusion is the issue of what qualifies as a disability under these programs. And, do I, as an individual who has an injury, qualify? Can you kind of explain and kind of set the record for how that process works and what does in fact qualify as a disability and what does not?
Sure. Social Security has some guidelines, okay, and it has to do with all sorts of different areas of what qualifies for disability, okay, and it's basically two separate areas. One is a medical disability of what type of disabling conditions do you have? How long are they expected to last? Because under the guidelines, your disabling conditions must last more than 12 consecutive months or result in death. Okay, sounds kind of harsh, but I mean that it's a very serious thing. What they do is they look at it. It's just not a short-term thing. Okay, because this once you're on disability, you're on it for life, unless they find that at some point in the future that with medication or maybe modern medicine, things like that, that you get better. And they will review it maybe every 3 years up to every 10 years. Now, the medical guidelines, if a doctor, and a Social Security doctor will examine you, or if you have treating physicians, if they find that you meet certain qualifications, then you will qualify for disability, certain guidelines. If you don't, then the next part is, okay, are there any jobs you can do with these various conditions that you have? So there's two separate areas, and that's called basically vocational. If you qualify for that part, I mean, in other words, what happens, and I explain it to clients like this, if you may have a truck driver that comes in. A truck driver has an illness, and a truck driver cannot go back to driving trucks.
Right.
That doesn't mean the truck driver is disabled, because there may be other jobs out there. Now, as a practical matter, the government kind of puts you into classes. They look at your age, they look at your educational background, they look at your what we call work experience, the past relevant work. And if there's a combination of those things, generally the older you are, it's kind of hard to teach an old dog new tricks. So the older you are, the better it is for you as far as qualifying for disability, because it's not as easy to transfer those skills that you may have acquired to go do some new job. In other words, it's better to be 52 than 22 in disability. Now, the first thing that the government's going to look at is, are you working? Are you working right now? And that's, the government loves acronyms, but it's a substantial gainful activity, or SGA. And a lot of people don't understand. They think, well, I'm on disability, can I work? If you get on disability, can I work? And the answer is yes, you can, but you can only work a certain amount. If you work over and make over a certain amount of money, then it will kick you off. Okay. But then the second part of the question is, how severe is your medical impairment? And that's kind of what Josh is talking about. And there's really no hard and fast answer to that. It could be a combination of things, which we often find. It could be even a combination of your medical impairments along with the medications that you take, because the medications may have side effects that impede your ability to concentrate or focus or maintain some sort of persistence and pace at work. So all of those things, that sort of the totality of the circumstances, are what we look at.
All right, so if you've got somebody sitting on the couch tonight watching the show, wondering whether or not they could qualify for disability, what's your recommendation? Is it to contact an attorney like you and at least ask questions and kind of work through the process?
Absolutely. My recommendation would be call an attorney, get some advice. Apply for disability. You can apply basically 3 different ways. If a person who's viewing wants to apply for disability, they can go to the local Social Security office, which is easy. You can pick up the phone and call them. And if you're lucky enough to have a computer, you can go to ssa.gov and apply online. Okay, any of those 3 ways. Now, At that point, it's usually 2 to 3 months after that. And they'll fill out a bunch of information, give a lot of information about income and things like that. And then at that point, an initial application will either be approved or denied. If it's denied, pick up that phone and call an attorney again.
Do you recommend you get a lawyer on the front end? I mean, is it are the cases taken on some form of contingency initially, where the individual does not have to pay the costs associated with the investigation phase? Or do you think that it's better for them to apply on their own? Kind of how do you fall there?
Well, great question. If it's an SSI case, and if a person knows that they haven't worked, say, in the past 5 years, either way, I would recommend go ahead and apply. Okay, and here's why. If you apply and you're approved, you don't need the attorney. Okay. But this is where your viewers need to understand. The Social Security, they're time sensitive. You only have a certain amount of time to do certain things. So once you apply, if you think you might be disabled, go ahead and apply today and get the process started. Because as I said, a lot of times these things take 12 to 18 months. If you're denied at the initial application level, pick up the phone, call an attorney, and then we can file your appeal. But the appeal must be filed within 60 days.
I want to talk about, when we come back from our break here, I want to talk about whether or not you are entitled from the time that you're approved to the time you applied, which could be up to 18 months, whether or not you're entitled to back pay during that time frame or back disability during that time period, because that's a question that we get a lot, David.
I bet. All right. We'll step aside our final break of the evening. Still a few minutes remaining. If you'd like to get a question into us, call, text, email. Also, you can find the firm of Hollis Wright on Facebook. If you'll just search that term, Hollis Wright, you'll find them there on Facebook and also on Twitter. On Twitter, it is Hollis_Wright. So able to find Hollis Wright on social media as well. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright. If you've ever served on a jury, you may have wondered why there are gaps in the evidence you're given at trial. In today's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, is there insurance to pay the verdict? Know this, just because the lawyers never mention insurance in a trial, it doesn't mean there's not insurance to pay the verdict. Rule 4-in-1 of the Alabama Rules of Evidence states this: evidence that a person was or was not insured against liability is generally not admissible or allowed to be discussed at trial in front of the jury. The reason for the rule is simple. A jury could award more money in a case if they knew the defendant had insurance to pay for it. But the reality in our state is this: in almost all lawsuits that get to a trial, insurance is there to pay judgments awarded by the jury. For example, all automobiles in Alabama are required to have liability insurance. Coverage can range from $25,000 up to $1 million in these cases. In theory, all car crash cases that get to trial should have insurance available to pay any verdict awarded in the case. Trucks have to carry anywhere from $750,000 to $5 million worth of insurance. Unfortunately, you'll never hear that during the trial. Even in medical malpractice cases, the doctor has liability insurance to help pay a judgment. That's something you won't hear during trial because the rules just don't allow that testimony. Yet almost all judgments against a doctor involve liability insurance. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our promise and pledge to you.
Welcome back into the Attorney's Hour. Final segment. If you have a question, you need to go ahead and get it into us. Call, text, email. Go ahead and get in touch with us, and we'll pass that question along with just a few minutes remaining in the show tonight. Josh?
All right, so when we went to break, I raised the issue, an issue that we get at our firm a lot. A lot of questions come in about this, and that's this. If you have a disability on a certain date, but it may take 12 to 18 months to get approval through the Social Security Administration, do you get back payment for the disability? Can you kind of go into that a little bit and explain that?
Sure. The quick answer is yes. What happens is, when anyone applies for disability, they have to give an onset date, which is a fancy way of saying, when do you think you became disabled? An alleged onset date. It's not as easy as maybe a car accident or something like that. Sometimes what we find in our practice is sometimes a person is working, they deteriorate, they can't do what they used to, they start missing work. They might even get fired because they can't work anymore.
Right.
That's when they go out and apply for disability, and that's the date they put. Now, to answer your question, Josh, once that happens and then they get denied at the initial application, then we apply for the appeal, and then finally when the administrative law judge hears, it might be a year and a half later. If that judge approves the person, they will get back pay all the way back to the date that they, I won't say applied, but that they were found disabled. So yes, there is back pay.
All right, a question we've got here. This is from an individual who qualified for disability, but their condition is continuing to get worse. Can their benefits increase or be increased?
No.
They can't?
No, they cannot. If you're on SSI, it's basically a flat rate that's determined by the government. Everybody receives, in essence, it's a little over $700 typically.
Right.
SSDI is determined by the amount that you put in. In other words, you can't be more disabled than you are. Once the government finds that you absolutely cannot work, that's when you get your benefit, and it's not going to, if your health deteriorates, you're not going to get an increased amount.
How long does this last? Once somebody qualifies for disability, either under the SSI program or SSDI program, how long does it last?
Well, it lasts indefinitely until if you're on SSDI, you will there's a 5-month waiting period from when you were approved. If you qualify for SSI, it's from your application date. Now, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, every couple of years they'll review it, but you'll continue to do it. I think the statistics are that the average person will go through, is in their 30s that qualifies for disability. And then, of course, when you get to retirement age, and if you're on Medicare, you just would stay on Medicare. You'll be on Medicaid if you're on SSI.
I'm thinking of, and you may have touched on this, but just to kind of clear this up, what if the condition is temporary and is not something you're going to have forever? What if, I'm thinking, vertigo or migraines or things that are kind of temporarily debilitating, but you can bounce back from. Even many surgeries, you can do that. So knock you out for a little while. How is that handled?
Great question, because let's think of it as a car accident, for instance. You may have a horrific car accident where you have some really bad injuries, and then you have surgeries, and then after 2 years, you gradually get better. You can qualify, it's rare, but you can qualify for what we call a closed period. And a closed period means, yes, you meet the qualifications for disability because it's more than 12 consecutive months, but it's not permanent. So what'll happen is that the judge will say, okay, I think you qualified for this amount of time, so I'm going to give you a closed period, and so you get your back benefits for that period.
So explain this process. When someone applies initially to the Social Security Administration, is the administrative law judge involved, or is there a board or a group that makes the initial judgment calls, and then if you're denied, you go to an administrative law judge? Is that how the process works?
In essence, yes. You'll apply at your local office or on the telephone or online. Okay, and then basically the Social Security will have what we like a state agency, the Disability Determination Services will sort of process it. They might send you to a doctor, and I think sometimes people think that might even be one of their treating doctors, but it's really not. That's a Social Security doctor that's hired by them to do a quick evaluation, and if you qualify, great, you'll be approved. If not, that's when we appeal it, and then ultimately an administrative law judge hears it.
And so is there a hearing for the administrative law judge where you go and you argue your case no different than you would in a traditional hearing that we would deal with?
Yes. What happens is, and I encourage all of the viewers, the single most important thing that people can do to try to help their chances with disability is treat. treat with medical doctors. The medical evidence, there's two things that administrative law judge is going to look at, and that's the traditional hearing that you're talking about, where you'll have a judge, you'll have a court reporter, you have a vocational expert, you might have a medical doctor to come testify, you have the claimant, and you have the attorney. And what will happen is the judge will look at that medical evidence. Now, a lot of times people say, I don't have any money, I can't go treat, but they need to be able to go to, there's Cooper Green, there's all sorts of facilities that are locally that have very low copays that we just try to encourage and refer people to. Birmingham Healthcare is a great facility. So by the time we go to the hearing, we have this evidence in front of the judge, we can argue that in front of the judge. The second part of the equation is the person's testimony. And that is subject to credibility and all sorts of things, because most people who come in, sometimes they think they need to say what the judge wants to hear, and we can talk with them about that, about the evidence that goes into it.
Mm-hmm. We're just about out of time, but just enough time for both of you all to have a final thought, and we'll let you go first.
A final thought for me would be for your viewers to, number one, don't give up. Go down, and if you think you cannot work, go ahead and apply, get the process started. And then if by chance you're not approved, call us, call an attorney. There's many good attorneys out there that can handle these things. It's a very standard contract that Social Security attorneys have with their clients. It's a standard fee for the out of the back pay. Normally, you do not have to write a check out of your pocket for any prepaid legal fees, so that's fairly standard, but don't give up.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I would echo that, don't give up. The reality is that this type of disability is for some people and it's not for others. Getting a lawyer involved early, I think, is a significant component to success. So I've talked with Stuart kind of offline from this show before, and I think he's mentioned it here, that the percentage of your ability to qualify for disability increases to the extent that you have a lawyer. So going to get a lawyer on the front end is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. In addition, it may not cost you a lot of money to do that. It's worth the initial consultation to try and work with a lawyer to figure out whether or not this is something that's applicable for me. And look, it's not for everybody. Right. Disability is not going to be approved for everybody, and that's the way the system works, and that's the way that our process works. But making sure that you have somebody holding your hand, leading, guiding, and directing you through the process is the key in these cases. Thank you for being on. You did a great job.
Thank you for having me.
Solid, knowledgeable guy about this stuff, which
Absolutely.
is great. Thank you, Stuart.
A lot of good ground covered. Appreciate you being with us. Appreciate you all being with us as well as we wrap things up. Here's how you can get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright. One final reminder there. Would love to hear from you. We'll look for you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.